When I bought the corner house in Willow Pines, I thought I was finally settling into peace. Clean sidewalks, tidy lawns, and the kind of silence you only find in manicured suburban developments. But behind the postcard-perfect symmetry was a regime. One ruled with a clipboard and a scowl. Her name was Carol Mattingly. "Just stay off her radar," the moving guy muttered as he unloaded my last box. "She is the HOA." At first, I laughed. It sounded like small-town paranoia, but within 3 days, I understood. A notice appeared on my door. Violation, non-regulation, mailbox. Deadline to replace, 72 hours. No signature, just a sharp-angled HOA logo and the phrase, "Compliance builds community." 2 days later, a second notice, violation, wind chimes audible from sidewalk, noise complaint filed. I hadn't even fully unpacked, and already I was in Carol's crosshairs. The third strike came in the form of a $50 fine. My crime, putting out my trash cans before 6 p.m. on collection day. That's when I stopped laughing, tried calling the number listed on the notice, but it routed to a voicemail that said, "You've reached the Willow Pines Compliance Office. Leave a message." I left 3, no replies. The neighbors were no help either. Most smiled awkwardly and said, "Yeah, Carol's particular. She wasn't elected. She appointed herself HOA president 10 years ago and had been reauthorizing her position through loopholes in the bylaws ever since. Over time, the rest of the board quit. Now, Carol was the board, writing the rules, enforcing them, and fining residents as she pleased. One morning, I stepped outside to find her on my property. Clipboard in hand, she was crouching beside my fence post, measuring tape stretched and taut. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "Fence exceeds height limit by 3 inches. You'll receive formal notice shortly." Then, she turned and walked off like a general, inspecting the troops. It would have been laughable if it weren't so effective. Everyone was scared of her. Even kids avoided her lawn like it was cursed ground. Still, I kept my cool. I followed the rules painstakingly. I painted the mailbox, removed the wind chimes, and adjusted the trash schedule down to the minute. But she kept coming. The last straw came when I returned home one Friday evening to find my driveway blocked by her second car. She had 2. A silver Lexus she drove, and a maroon Cadillac she barely used. That Cadillac had been creeping closer and closer to my mailbox over the weeks. Now it sat across the mouth of my driveway like a sleeping dragon. I knocked on her door. No answer. I rang the bell. Still nothing, so I waited, arms folded. 10 minutes later, she opened the door just enough to peer through the gap. "Your car is blocking my driveway," I said, keeping my voice even. She smiled like I was a child who'd drawn on the walls. "It's public street parking. You'll manage. It's obstructing my right of way." She widened the door just enough to lean out. "Then call the city. Let's see what they say." And she shut it in my face. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the maroon barricade. That's when I realized something. Carol wasn't just power hungry. She thrived on conflict. Her authority was never about order. It was about control. So I made a decision. The next morning, I parked my pickup truck directly across from her driveway, on the public curb, perfectly legal, perfectly within the bylaws, and just inconvenient enough to make her grind her teeth. It wasn't long before I heard the door slam open. "You are blocking my access," she screamed across the cul-de-sac. I stepped out from my porch, coffee in hand. "Still plenty of room to back out, Carol." Her lips twitched. "Move it. Now." I took a sip. "Street parking's legal." I checked. Her face turned crimson. This isn't over, I nodded. Didn't think it would be. She spun on her heel and stormed back into her house, barking something unintelligible into her phone. Inside, I sat down, pulled out my tablet, and opened my dash cam app. I had a feeling I'd want it rolling today, because Carol wasn't just mad. She was about to escalate. Carol Mattingly's wrath was swift and merciless. By mid-morning, the entire cul-de-sac buzzed with whispers, neighbors peeking through curtains, kids exchanging rumors on sidewalks, and a few brave souls nodding in quiet solidarity. Her parking tactic wasn't subtle. It was a statement. The maroon Cadillac sat squarely in front of my mailbox again, as if daring me to complain. I took a slow walk over, careful not to ruffle feathers or escalate tensions, yet firm enough to send a message. With a phone in hand, I snapped pictures. The posted regulations were clear. Blocking a mailbox was prohibited. I forwarded the photos and a polite email to the local postmaster, who assured me he'd send an inspector. Meanwhile, I sent a concise note to the HOA board, knowing full well it would land squarely on Carol's desk alone, pointing out the blatant violation. Hours passed without acknowledgement. Carol operated as if the rules were hers to rewrite at will. An untouchable queen in her neighborhood kingdom. Determined. I went outside and did something small, but deliberate. I parked my truck directly across from her driveway. The spot was public street parking, legal and unrestricted. Still, it was a clear reminder that her game wasn't going unnoticed. Carol appeared on her porch moments later, arms crossed like a general, surveying a battlefield. "You're blocking my driveway," she said sharply, eyes flashing. I leaned casually against the truck's door. "The street is public. I'm legally parked." "That's close enough," she snapped. "I want you to move now." A slow grin crept across my face. HOA bylaws, page 17, section C. Parking on public street. I double-checked this. Morning. Carol's face flushed crimson, veins visible at her temples. Her grip tightened on the railing. "You're playing with fire." "I'm just playing with facts." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You think you're clever? I'll have this truck towed." I raised an eyebrow. "You'd need a legal reason." And the city would laugh that away. Carol's lip curled in contempt. "You're pushing your luck." The tension thickened like a storm front. I could almost hear the neighborhood holding its collective breath. Suddenly, the high-pitched whine of an engine filled the air. From around the corner, a white tow truck rolled into view, cautious and slow, like an uninvited arbiter arriving to judge the dispute. I walked to the driver as he parked beside the truck, shielding his eyes from the sun. "You called about towing?" I asked. He nodded, eyes flickering with uncertainty. Carol stormed out of her house, her presence radiating fury. "Tow it now," she commanded, voice booming. The driver glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Is it blocking the driveway?" "Yes," Carol shouted. "No, ma'am," I said, stepping in. "It's legally parked on public street. There's plenty of clearance." "You're mistaken." Carol's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." The driver shifted nervously. "I'm not towing without the police here. It's too risky." "That's..." When Carol's tone sharpened. "Fine, call the cops." She whipped out her phone and dialed. Within minutes, the wail of a siren broke the suburban calm. A police cruiser cruised in, sleek and authoritative. Officer Daniels stepped out, his demeanor calm but authoritative. He was the kind of cop who inspired respect without demanding it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a quick smile that belied sharp eyes always watching. Carol marched up to him immediately, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Officer, this man is blocking my driveway. I'm the HOA president, and I demand that..." his vehicle be fined and towed immediately. Officer Daniels listened patiently, his gaze shifting between Carol and me. I handed him my ID and tablet. Opening the dashcam footage I had recorded earlier that morning, the screen showed a clear timeline. The truck parked legally, with enough room on both sides to pass through. He watched quietly, then looked back at Carol. His face twitched slightly, and then, unexpectedly, a chuckle escaped his lips. Carol's face paled. "What's so funny?" Officer Daniels shook his head, smiling broadly now. "Ma'am, the truck isn't blocking your driveway. There's more than 10 feet of clearance." He turned to me. "And your parking is perfectly legal." Carol's fury twisted into disbelief. "I'm the HOA president, and I'm Officer Daniels," he replied, his grin widening. "Which means my badge carries actual authority." The tow truck driver sighed in relief and pulled away. Carol's shoulders sagged, as if a weight had lifted, only to reveal the deep humiliation beneath. She muttered something under her breath and retreated indoors. The neighbors watching from behind curtains began to whisper again, but this time the tone was different, hope mixed with a hint of rebellion. I gave Officer Daniels a nod of thanks. "Don't thank me yet," he said, still smiling. "This one's far from over." As I closed the door behind me, I realized that parking across from Carol's driveway wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a challenge, a line drawn in the sand, and Carol was going to cross it. The day after Officer Daniels showed up laughing at Carol's demands, Willow Pines felt different. It was as if a collective weight had lifted from the neighborhood's shoulders. The invisible chains Carol had wrapped around us all, tightening, with every petty fine and arbitrary rule, were suddenly loosened. Yet I knew better than to think the war was over. Carol Mattingly's rule was born of ego and entitlement, and those things never die quietly. That morning, I left my house cautiously, half expecting a new notice or an angry note stuck under my windshield wiper. But instead, I found a glossy, professionally printed flyer taped to my mailbox. Willow Pines Community Meeting, HOA update, held that evening at the community center, 7 p.m. sharp. The flyer was thick with buzzwords: preserving property, values, neighborhood safety, community standards enforcement. But beneath the platitudes, it was obvious. Carol wanted a showdown, a platform to flex her authority and remind everyone who really ran the show. I spent the day preparing. I printed copies of the HOA bylaws. I compiled emails and photos, evidence of Carol's abuses and inconsistencies. I even recorded a few neighbors who had experienced her iron fist. It was time for the silent majority to speak up. At 6:45 p.m., the community center was already buzzing. Neighbors trickled in, casting wary glances at one another. Carol arrived like a queen descending from her throne, immaculate in her blazer, clipboard under arm, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. She wasted no time opening the meeting with a rehearsed speech about order and responsibility. Her voice was sharp, clipped, every sentence dripping with self-righteous certainty. The crowd listened politely but uneasily. When it was my turn, I stood and cleared my throat. "I'm new here," I began, voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "But in just a few weeks, I've seen rules applied with a level of bias and intimidation that's not right for any community. We're neighbors, not subjects." A few heads nodded. I pulled out the printed bylaws and waved them gently. "These rules are meant to protect us all, not give unchecked power to one person." Carol's lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you implying I've broken the rules?" "I'm saying we need transparency and fairness. If we're going to live in this neighborhood, we need to make sure the HOA is accountable, including its president. A murmur ran through the room. Some faces brightened with hope. Others were skeptical. Carol's eyes flashed. Accountability? I've kept this neighborhood safe and orderly for over a decade. Without these rules, this place would be chaos. I shook my head. Order isn't oppression. Rules shouldn't be weaponized. A man from the back spoke up, his voice gravelly, but firm. I'm Tom. Carol fined me last year for painting my house a color she didn't approve, but my paint matched two others on the street. I appealed, but nothing changed. I just paid up to avoid trouble. More hands went up, neighbors sharing, stories of arbitrary fines, petty rules, and impossible standards. Carol's face tightened. This is a witch hunt, she spat. You want to tear down the system that's kept Willow Pines great? No, I said calmly. We want a system that works for us. The meeting grew louder, more passionate. Carol tried to regain control, raising her voice over the crowd. But her words fell flat. The neighbors had tasted the idea of change, and they weren't ready to give it up. Before the meeting ended, Officer Daniel showed up again. He walked in quietly, nodding to several neighbors. His presence was a silent reminder. The law was watching. Carol shot him a venomous glare, but said nothing. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, I caught a glimpse of Carol standing alone by her car. Her shoulders hunched, but her eyes burned with a dangerous fire. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. In the days that followed, Carol's tactics escalated. She sent out letters, threatening liens on properties that dared to question her. She posted surveillance signs, as if trying to turn the entire neighborhood into a police state. The mailbox notices returned with double the frequency, now targeting minor infractions like flower bed design and lawn ornament placement. But the community spirit had shifted. Neighbors began talking openly, sharing stories and standing up for each other. An underground resistance was forming, not loud or confrontational, but steady and unyielding. One afternoon, as I watered my garden, Mrs. Alvarez, my elderly neighbor, approached with a stack of petitions. We're tired of Carol's reign, she said, her voice firm but kind. We want a new board with real elections. I took the petitions, feeling the weight of her trust. I'm with you, I said. She smiled. Good, because it's time we take back our neighborhood. But Carol was watching. I caught her eye from my porch one evening. The look in her eyes was pure venom. She wasn't just angry. She was preparing for battle, and so was I. The stakes were clear now. This was a fight not just for my driveway or my mailbox, but for the soul of Willow Pines. As night fell, I looked out over the quiet street. The power struggle had moved from silent resentments to an open war, and I was ready. The tension in Willow Pines reached a boiling point one bright Saturday morning. Carol's final gambit was clear. She had ordered the neighborhood tow company to park a large flatbed in front of my house, a menacing sentinel ready to haul off any vehicle daring to challenge her authority. It was intimidation, pure and simple. As I stepped outside and saw the tow truck idling by the curb, my pulse quickened, not out of fear, but anticipation. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispers spreading like wildfire. I had no intention of backing down. Instead, I calmly walked over and climbed into my truck, starting the engine. The tow driver approached, clipboard in hand, clearly uneasy. I'm here on orders to tow your vehicle, he said, eyes darting between me and the neighborhood watching. On what grounds? I asked, voice steady. HOA president's orders, he replied reluctantly. They say you're blocking her driveway. I laughed softly. That's rich, considering I park legally in a public space. Want to see the bylaws? Before he could answer, A familiar voice cut through the morning stillness. "Morning, folks." Officer Daniels strode up. Casual but authoritative. He flashed his badge, drawing immediate attention. Carol emerged from her house, looking furious. "Officer Daniels, this man is flagrantly violating HOA rules. He's blocking my driveway again, and I demand enforcement." Daniels raised an eyebrow and turned to me. "Mind if I see your truck and parking spot?" I guided him over. He circled the truck, inspected the driveway clearance, and pulled out a tape measure from his pocket. In less than a minute, it was clear. Over 15 feet of clearance, more than enough for any vehicle to enter or exit. "Ma'am," Daniels said, addressing Carol, "your driveway is not blocked." Carol's face twisted in disbelief, her voice trembling with frustration. "I'm the HOA president. This is my neighborhood, and these rules apply." Daniels shook his head with a small, amused smile. "Actually, the HOA rules cannot supersede city ordinances or public road laws. Parking on the public street is legal as long as it doesn't impede traffic or block a driveway, which it doesn't." A few neighbors watching from across the street burst out laughing quietly. The absurdity of Carol's relentless crusade was becoming a neighborhood joke. Carol's fury finally cracked, and she shouted, "You're making a mockery of me. I will have your license revoked for this disrespect." Daniels let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "License revoked? For parking legally? Ma'am, you might want to rethink your priorities." He looked back at me and said with a grin, "Don't worry, you're good to go. Enjoy your legal parking spot." Carol stood frozen, mouth agape, as Daniels handed me a small card and walked away, chuckling softly. The tow truck driver sighed, shrugged, and pulled away. The neighborhood erupted into applause and laughter, a collective release of weeks of tension. That afternoon, I stood on my porch watching neighbors gather, smiles replacing wary glances. Carol's iron grip had cracked, her carefully maintained image shattered by the simple truth of legality and community support. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the following week. Under mounting pressure, Carol was forced to resign. A new board was elected, one committed to fairness, transparency, and community harmony. As for me, my driveway remained my own, unblocked, unchallenged, and a symbol of standing up to unchecked power. Officer Daniels's laughter wasn't just humor. It was justice, delivered with a grin. A reminder that sometimes the simplest truth can dismantle even the most stubborn tyranny. And in Willow Pines, the people had found their voice again.